Sentimental old fool. 19 minutes past 10. Now on to the good bit. Our special guests for this morning. They're members of Flautissimo. 58 flutes, 3 double bass players, bass clarinet, percussion and 2 pianos. What a sound. We're going to hear it right now, and then we'll meet 3 members of Flautissimo, all flute players. So it all makes sense. Here's a unique sound, something maybe new to your ear. Flautissimo and St. Louis Blues. It's very quiet at the moment. I tell you what, we'll spin it back to the beginning, Julia. It's a unique sound, isn't it? I think the main appeal is it's so quiet. We'll try again. It's one of the joys of live local radio. All I need now is for the 3 guests to faint. We've really got a party on our hands. Are we okay now? Technical assistant. Yes, more or less. We should be, but we'll keep chatting. Okay, I'll tell you what, I'll introduce our special guest to you. Who's now completely disintegrated into hysterics. They are Juliet Offner and Zoe Brookes and Liz Cook, and it's very nice to see you. Well, eventually we'll get this sound on the air. It's not a ploy. You haven't erased everything from the cassette, have you? So that people have to come and see you in concert. We'll talk to Juliet Offner. You're the senior member of our 3 guests.
That's right.
But still a slip of the last, I'm sure. You're not sort of drawing your last breath or anything.
I feel as though I might be.
It's a great idea, though, isn't it, to get together a flute orchestra? I've been told this idea is more popular in the USA than it is in Britain. Is there any particular reason for that, Juliet?
I can only think that there may be more flute players over there.
Yeah.
I don't know, really.
And it's interesting because Flautissimo, your flute orchestra, is predominantly female. You've only got about, 3 or 4 guys, and the rest are women.
That's right, yes.
Any reason for that at all?
More girls start playing the flute. I don't know why.
Yeah.
You look at the you look at the flute players, everybody knows, and they're all men. But I don't know why that's true.
It's quite expensive,
stigma
isn't
to
it?
the instrument, isn't there? And it's supposed to be sissy or something for boys to play the flute. I mean, it's a ridiculous idea, but they tend to go for brass instruments more.
That surprises me, actually. That's the voice of Liz Cook, isn't it, Liz? Zoe Brookes. Yes, we'll all be sorted out in a minute. That's Zoe Brookes there. Liz Cook has yet to speak.
Yeah.
I was going to say it's expensive, actually, to take up flute. Are you going to pay a lot of money for even a fairly decent instrument? What sort of money are we talking about?
Well, a flute's actually one of the cheapest instruments to buy a good one of, but it's still about £150 to get a decent instrument.
And that's for even something that's just about
yes,
playable.
to begin on, yes.
So if you start at school, the school probably has some instruments you can use yourself that they lend out to pupils for their stay in the school, and you can have peripatetic lessons. So that's a really good start for a lot of people.
Yeah, that was the voice of Liz Cook at last. Flautissimo was got together by Robin Soldan. He's a flute teacher for Hampshire County Council, and formed the orchestra to give his pupils and those of other teachers a chance to play together. Very solitary sort of occupation, flute playing. I can imagine you sitting in a room just playing to yourself, so it must be wonderful to play with other flute players. Is it hard to get you, let me come back to Juliet now, is it hard to get used to actually playing with other people in a large orchestra like that?
I think it probably is, and I think that's one very good reason for having the flute orchestra, because there are so many flute players around, so many people learning the flute, and so many adults playing flute as well, that actually there's a superfluity of flutes, and it's very difficult to get into orchestras generally around here. And I mean, it's nice with the school orchestras and that kind of thing, but the flute orchestra in particular gives young players, I think, a chance to start off and get used to playing in a group from a very early
Do you remember your first experience of that, Zoe, when you started with Flautissimo? Was it a bit of a shock when you had to play and
Yes,
consider other people?
I was very worried about it. I started playing with a group with Mr. Solden. It wasn't actually Flautissimo, but it was a similar large group. And I was overwhelmed by the number of flutes, and I just felt, how am I going to cope? I couldn't count the bars, and I was sitting at the back, and I couldn't see the conductor. It was terrible.
I would imagine however good a player you are, it's very easy to become quite undisciplined when you're just playing by yourself.
Yes. When you're playing with a group, you have to worry the whole time about whether you're in tune or not. And it just overtakes you. It's worry about being sharp or flat or something.
We can hear that sound because at last, and people will get a better idea of what we're talking about. Let's hear Flautissimo now, and the number we promised you earlier on, St. Louis Blues. There we are, Flautissimo and St. Louis Blues, and then we were chatting away. They almost missed the end of it. Special guest today, Juliet Offner, Liz Cook and Zoe Brookes of Flautissimo, all flute players, as you would expect, but there are other instruments in there as well. Is there any obvious reason for the instrumentation you have, Juliet, the setup of the other instruments?
Oh, it was to add some variation to the sound, and to have, it gives you more versatility, really, to have a bass line and to have some percussion as well. It makes maybe a slightly more interesting sound, gives you the opportunity to play other pieces of music as well.
Yeah. Liz Cook, I'll come back to you now. Do you find that the flute has enough scope for you as a musician? Or?
Oh yes, definitely, because there's so much music has been written through such a long period of time for the flute, right from medieval and Baroque and Renaissance up to jazz and very modern music now. A lot of modern music for, surprisingly, flute orchestras is coming out of America, where it is much more popular.
Yes, as we said before. You started playing flute when you were 9.
Yes.
So you were encouraged by your parents, or was it your own decision at that time?
I'd always played the recorder, which is something that many children start at first school, and I'd always enjoyed that, and I wanted to continue in that line of wind instruments.
It's a natural progression, is it? I mean, we all, as you say, we all take recorder at school.
Yeah.
Very few of us reach any kind of a standard. But if you do it, it's a natural progression to go on to flute.
I think so. It's not exactly the same sort of instrument, but being a wind instrument, and it's got quite a similar fingering, and it's quite an easy progression, especially for young people, actually.
Zoe Brookes is former member of Southampton School's Wind Band, member of Southampton Youth Orchestra. There again, that's great, isn't it? Because you're working with other young people. Does everybody want to become full-time musicians later on? Is that the whole idea?
No, I mean, especially in Flautissimo, it's really just a sideline for people who enjoy playing music. They're not going to be professional musicians, because those people tend to go on and play in the bigger orchestras, the Hampshire Youth Orchestra and all that kind of thing. They're all supposed to be very good at it. But we're much more a hobby thing, and we're intending to follow other careers, but just like to do it in our spare time, and it's just an opportunity to play, even though we're not as good as maybe some of the people who get into the big orchestras.
Is luck a big factor as far as carving out a decent career in music professionally nowadays?
Yeah, I think so. You've got to know the right people. Yeah.
It is like that, isn't it?
But obviously a lot of practice, but I mean, there are lots of people who, if they wanted to, could practice and get to a standard, but you've got to have the right contacts, I think, to get, you go to the right schools and this kind of thing to get anywhere.
Well, I thank you again for coming in and seeing us. We must plug the concerts now. Rather crude term, isn't it? For some exquisite music. On the 2nd of June, you can see and hear Flautissimo, a lunchtime concert in Chichester Cathedral in aid of the Organ Fund. On the 13th of July, National Festival of Music for Youth. That's an evening concert in the Purcell Room. And in November, sometime, British Flute Society Flute Club Day. That's a concert in Birmingham, which is ever so slightly outside of the Solent area. But I'd sincerely hope that Juliet, or one of the other members of Flautissimo, will keep us up to date with the concert dates, and I'll pass them on to you. Juliet, how do you see things going in the future with Flautissimo? Will you just carry on playing the concerts? Do you have any wider sort of ambitions as an orchestra?
Well, I think we'd like to become better known in the area. We'd like to give more concerts, obviously. The Festival for Youth Music is quite an exciting thing. It's actually going to be in London, and we got asked to give that concert after having given an audition here. So that might well lead on to a performance at the school proms in the Albert Hall in November, which would be a very exciting thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And just to extend the repertoire.
Yes, but as Zoe was saying, I mean, the main thing is just to play together and keep the thing going and feed each other, musically speaking,
right.
spiritually. Keep it going.
That's right.
Yeah. Brian Boru's March is coming up now, and I shall thank you all again for joining us before the morning's out. But tell us a little bit about this piece of music and how, in fact, you choose the repertoire for Flautissimo.
What we've done so far is just use the music that we had. This, in fact, is an Irish march that Robin Soldan arranged for the orchestra, and I think it works very effectively.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's hear it now. Our thanks again to Juliet Offner, Liz Cook and Zoe Brookes for joining us. Flautissimo and Brian Boru's March. Brian Boru's March from Flautissimo. Two contrasting pieces of music there. We started off eventually with St. Louis Blues, as you would have heard, and finished with the piece we've just heard, of course, Brian Boru's March. Thanks again to Juliet Offner, Zoe Brookes and Liz Cook for joining us, and more power to Flautissimo in the area, and for you to see and hear and enjoy quite soon now. I'll keep you up to date with the concert dates, as I said before.